Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Limitbreaker Jam Sessions. I'm your host, Andrew Bennett, and today we're sitting down with the ever so excellent Dom Draper to talk about his musical inspirations and style.
Andrew, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here. I've been just wigging with excitement all day.
I can't blame you. I've kind of been in the same situation. This is something that this whole series of interviews has been something that I've eagerly anticipated. Just the amount of variety that I've found, not just in musical style, but also in how people create their music, how they reach out to share it with others. It's different for every single person. It's kind of an art in and of itself.
Right.
And so, I guess might as well get right on into our handy-dandy little list of questions, starting right at the beginning. So, Dom, when did you first take an interest in making music? What got you started?
So for me, it was hearing music in the house growing up. From the start, really got my ear interested in what was kind of happening behind the scenes. I would start listening to things separately, kind of in my head, the guitars, the vocals, and that really led me to figuring out what the next step was to make music myself, and also maybe start kind of working with or remixing existing music, like finding tracks that, or isolating them myself using software as best as I could to get the vocals alone or something like that. And I just found it so interesting hearing especially little sputters here or coughs or like the little things you weren't meant to hear that you don't hear in the final track when everything's all mixed and mastered. But you hear when those tracks are separated. And that was the moment I was able to kind of get some tracks and some software and record myself and also work with those existing tracks. That was really the point when I decided I really want to make music and also learn how to do this more seriously.
That's really interesting. Just the amount of detail that you can find in the part rather than the whole, really?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And everything contributes to that whole. And a lot of times, even those little, a lot of things go unnoticed, like maybe those coughs or sputters, the things that you don't really necessarily want to hear. But then when you pull apart the tracks and then you hear what they do want you to hear, layered instruments, maybe small percussion that you didn't quite realize was there, and or that maybe you just hadn't realized was there, but now you do when you listen to the final product as well, because you've kind of picked it out from the crowd now.
There's times where you can't really unhear or unsee something.
Right.
So, who would you consider your biggest inspiration when you were first starting out?
Hands down, it was Aerosmith. Aerosmith was the biggest band in my house growing up. My parents were huge fans. They listened to a lot of classic rock, mind you, but Aerosmith was their favorite. So we had Aerosmith on in the house constantly. And this was the group that introduced me to, guitar riffs, man, guitar riffs. And that was where I started. I realized kind of my anchor point for music would be the guitar. And it was my aspiration not to shred or do anything too crazy, but to deliver meaningful riffs with just enough technicality to keep it interesting, but really it's more about what you feel. And I feel like Aerosmith really encapsulates that raw rock energy in most of their music.
That's a really good choice. Aerosmith, I mean, you can't go wrong. You really cannot go wrong with Aerosmith.
Right? I'd like to say that there was, of course, the common debate of old Aerosmith, new Aerosmith. If you're into them, you might fall in one camp or the other. Me personally, I can respect the entire catalog. I'm more of a little bit more of a modern guy these days, so I actually have grown to appreciate the newer style stuff a little bit more than I used to. But again, for me, I think they're a really good example of a band that was able to grow, and granted they haven't really done too much too recently as far as a classic rock outfit. They went classic rock, they touched hard rock, they did some more poppy stuff, and I can really respect that.
There's some times where some albums and some styles of music are just kind of growers, really. There's this kind of in the
Yeah.
moment reaction that when somebody changes styles, just kind of starts shifting gears, that you've got this thing that, like, well, as a fan, I like aspects A, B, and C. You are changing aspects A, B, and C, so I'm going to be angry. And
Right.
that's a pretty base instinct reaction. But you eventually hit a point, I feel, where you come around and realize this was only bad in the moment because I expected thing A, I got thing B, but thing B is still pretty good in and of itself.
Right. That really encapsulates something that I've felt many times myself, and I try now. Yeah, sometimes I'll even feel that, but my knee-jerk reaction when I was younger was to turn it off. But now I kind of I know about that concept of those growers, those albums that just need a little bit of time, and then before you know it, you find merits. Yeah, thing B, it's different than thing A. It's missing that thing, but oh, they're definitely still doing something interesting here. They've evolved, and I can really respect that. I have shifted camps in that regard, from my childhood to my adulthood, and I think it's a beautiful thing to kind of take that fresh and or kind of look at it with fresh eyes, because that's the beauty of music, is that we have so many different ways to tackle this same thing, like just putting some notes together to make something nice sounding. Same mission, but it's so cool to even hear the same outfit decide to do it a little differently.
Yeah, then, this is also kind of a stealth discussion about Chinese Democracy by Guns N' Roses.
Ooh, I believe you're right.
Oh, man.
Oh man. Oh yeah,
That's
he's got a great low note on that one. Which one is it? I think it might be Shackler's Revenge. Like he's like, I've got a funny feeling. It's like, that's Axl Rose. Are you kidding me, man? Damn.
Yeah, no, there's some times where you don't get what you were expecting at all.
Right.
But so you started off, getting completely inspired by Aerosmith and taking songs apart. Has that changed any since over the years? How's your inspiration shifted?
My inspiration has shifted a lot. So I grew up on classic rock, and that was my foundation. When I um gosh, it was basically my love story, but when I found Alex, she really exposed me to a lot of pop music that I wasn't really appreciating. I was too busy to dismiss as a child because I was kind of rock or nothing. and, and I've come to really start appreciating the elements that these other genres bring to the table. So for me, the inspiration started when, or I should say, my inspiration started growing when Alex had exposed me to Lady Gaga, and that was just a little bit of something different for me. Okay, I knew her from her hits, but I didn't know the rest of her work, and in particular, the one album that really has, to this day, still inspired me, and is still inspiring me, and I can't wait to just talk about this a little more here, but Lady Gaga, she can do just about anything, and that's the beauty of it. A beauty of her talent and kind of how she approaches music is, yeah, she can do jazz, thing A, thing B, thing C, whether it's rock, jazz, or pop, whether it's ballad pop or it's art pop. Now, art pop being her album, Art Pop, that album for me has just incredible depth and texture to it. When you listen to the music, the just the bass alone has been my biggest. It's like the pinnacle of what inspires me with that album. For example, it's like this gritty, bumpy door bass. It's like so interesting. I think it's pioneered by Zed, and he just blew me away with that. That one, that gets me. So I've started becoming inspired by, gritty synthy bass lines and dirty stuff like that. And it's kind of actually a perfect marriage to rock and roll and classic rock and hard rock, because you can combine riffs with gritty and bumpy bass, and all these things end up coming together. And then I'm finding that my inspiration has grown even beyond that. We both as a couple, Alex and I, but myself also listening to more pop music, let's hear some more metal music. Like I had never listened to any real metal outfits seriously, but then I found myself listening to Anthrax obsessively. Have you ever listened to Anthrax?
I don't think I have, though I definitely know the name. I want to say that Scott, who's kind of a regular around Limitbreaker operations, has introduced me to them at one point or another, though I don't remember what song, and I can't really remember much of it.
Yeah.
Though Scott has done a pretty good job of introducing me to a lot of heavier and more artsy types of music in general, in particular, and he will be very proud to hear me bring up this band. They're called Me Without You.
Ooh, okay.
And that's all as one word.
Me Without You.
Yeah, Me Without You.
Ooh, okay.
It's a very interesting type of band because it challenges my idea of what music is, kind of. Because usually you think of lyrics to a song traditionally just being sung, and they're an acquired taste. I have not fully acquired them yet, but I'm glad that I was introduced to them because it's all spoken word for the lyrics.
Oh,
and that is something that just challenges my idea of what a song is, what lyrics are, and the art form as a whole. There's kind of this point where I kind of came to accept music as not just being what I had traditionally defined music as myself, though I did have some varied tastes growing up. In my teenage years, I had one half of my library was, you had your EDM, you had Daft Punk, and etc., a bunch of French house artists like Justice. And then on the other half was like, okay, you've got Eric Clapton, you've got a lot of blues rock, a couple of outfits associated with Clapton like Derek and the Dominoes.
Right on.
Oh, man. So it's like I already had variety there.
Right.
But that's not full on, how do I put this? All music is art, but there's a separate genre of what I would almost consider art music.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, and that's what's really changed the way I look at music, the way I look at albums, the way I kind of conceptualize a lot of these things, because technically almost anything can be music.
Yeah, agreed.
And it's a norm that is always being challenged. I mean, you have to look at a lot, like you mentioned, Aerosmith is a huge inspiration to you. Like, you think to yourself, okay, that type of music that Aerosmith was making, let's say 50 years beforehand, was seen as either obscene or not fit to listen to by the majority of people.
Right.
So what people will listen to 50 years from now is something that you're going to listen to and say to yourself, well, I think this is maybe just noise.
Yeah, I think that is beautiful. There's actually something very interesting parallel I want to draw to a specific genre, and how Spotify promotes it. It's called Hyperpop, and Hyperpop is, according to Spotify, it's the future, and it's a little trashy sounding. And for example, one of the artists pioneering mainstream hyperpop is Charlie XCX, and her music can get pretty distorted and broken and interesting like that, texturally interesting. And now somebody who I am a massive fan of is Dorian Electra, and Dorian Electra is a hyperpop artist and is the hyperpop artist for me. When I think of the genre, they are incredible. From the songwriting is interesting. The songwriting, I love the stories as you go through the songs. Vocally, so everywhere. As in, we've just got Cher like super dark sounding vocals to like super bright and poppy stuff, and
oh man,
they as a vocalist is just very good. And I would recommend listening to Hyperpop because it is totally my earworm right now.
I will absolutely have to check that out. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, check. There is one recommendation. You don't have to go any farther than Flamboyant, the album by Dorian Electra. That is it.
Flamboyant. I will save that one to my Spotify library right this moment. There we go.
Beautiful.
Man, I look over in the sidebar on my Spotify. I see another band there that is another kind of genre fusion. Have you ever heard of Thank You Scientist? This is another group that that's Scott. I'm saying Spot because I'm looking at Spotify. I hate this. Oh, but Scott recommended me this group called Thank You Scientist, which is a very, very, very interesting group. Let's call it kind of a hybrid of, you've got a bit of rock, but then you've also gotten that DNA. I don't know exactly the right term for it. Almost kind of a more traditional band style. I mean, I wouldn't call it exactly big band. That's not the right word for it, but you've got this such big variety and range of instruments at work here that it's more than you expect to hear from a prog rock album.
Oh, okay.
And absolutely, I would say check out their song Blood on the Radio, and it should give you a good example of what I'm talking about. They're a very interesting group from what I've listened to so far, and I don't know, lately I've just been very, very focused on this idea of not just the evolution of artists, but the evolution of music itself.
Yeah.
And it's something where another very freeing idea for me is back to that idea that I had mentioned of where music can be effectively anything.
Right.
On top of that, you don't have to do what is considered the norm. You don't have to do what is considered popular. If you do something unique enough or something well enough, you will inevitably find a space where you belong as a musician. That's my personal belief.
I believe that as well.
And sometimes it's very hard to get out there. It's very hard to get found, especially as we go in this very, very big digital age, just filled to the brim with everything's algorithmic now.
Yeah.
Spotify's is very good, but even still, there is no algorithm in the world that can make it possible to avoid a lot of the little guys inevitably feeling like they're trampled for years upon years upon years. And maybe they never get their full breakout, but here's hoping the majority of them will still at the very least find their niche.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really is kind of what you can hope for. Can I find that niche? Can I find just a way to make this work and still be able to do this?
And it's like, you ask yourself the question sometimes, it's like, is it to stand out? Is it to be picked up by the algorithm? Or is it to know the right people or get to knowing the right people?
Right. I feel that last one is extremely important.
Yeah. Like, the last interview that I recorded was with Nicolas Tessier, who's a good friend of mine. And he and I were discussing it because he got around in the Toronto indie scene.
Okay.
And I just asked him flat out, how did you do that? And his response was he would go to concerts and he would just start talking to people. Eventually, he would find somebody at a concert because, unsurprising, lots of musicians, given that they like music, go to concerts.
Yeah, right?
And so he would just start talking with people. He would eventually find somebody with the same interests of him, and they'd start collaborating.
Oh, wow.
That's obviously beautiful. Not as possible in our current, global pandemic.
I know that's gonna date this in the future, right? We could hope this is just a little speck that we all forget eventually, but
oh yeah. I mean, I can really date it for me right now. So that when I look back on this in the future, it's like today at work, I'm currently working in very much technically the healthcare field, though I'm in the culinary division.
Right.
And we are now getting a full set of face shields to go along with face masks. We're having options for goggles being provided now. And it's very interesting being on the outer flanks of the front lines, I guess you could almost put it as.
Yeah.
And that little bit there in and of itself will date this heavily.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, of course, wishing you just the best health as we go through this.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I think we'll be all right, though. We're taking the proper precautions we have to, so.
Perfect.
But so back to speaking about music and style and how that all evolves. As you were talking there about how Alex had introduced you to Lady Gaga, how you came to realize, how that kind of blends in with rock, and how you got into all of that. I assume that leads into your 2019 EP, On My Mind.
That is a really, really good segue. On My Mind was such an interesting experience. I previously, as far as music I had released, was pretty big on telling a story, or just kind of writing a tune that I could sing. Um, it's kind of actually interesting because I started off with instrumentals, but I was never really so keen on structure. I really or arrangement of these instrumentals. I found that it was kind of hard to write a convincing piece without any lyrics at first. And
Hmm.
Alex had encouraged me to start singing, and I didn't have any sort of singing voice in the beginning, so it was entirely just trying to make it sound good enough with studio takes and stuff like that. But oh my gosh, just to think of the growth since then. But the focus then at that point had become writing songs with lyrics and telling a story, whether it be something funny. I've written some satirical songs, some are love songs, some are just, something about
Yeah.
dreams.
Yeah.
But On My Mind was very special because it was an opportunity to try to make a compelling instrumental album. And I had found myself extremely inspired by a group, or I believe it might actually be just one person, Carpenter Brute. Carpenter Brute is a synthwave group, and I was introduced to them by a coworker from one of my previous jobs. He was like, "You have to check this guy out," and it was the perfect music. He told me to, develop to, and I'm like, "What is this?" Okay, it was my first introduction to synthwave, and synthwave. Whoa! I did not realize how cool synthwave wave was. It
Oh
just
man.
captured me. I was like, "Oh my gosh!" All this energy and this motion, and it always felt dark and gritty and dystopian, and I just could get behind that. And I had this nagging feeling. Now, I guess to kind of frame this a little bit, On My Mind was 2019, and I had been listening to Carpenter Brute since, I believe, 2000, either 2014 or 2015. And I had this nagging feeling that I wanted to put together some sort of instrumentals in tribute to Carpenter Brute for years. I just never really felt like it was the right time. Like I was technically capable, like I was inspired. And then I don't quite remember how it came about, but last year it just finally felt right. And I was able to sit down and write these tracks, kind of pick something that inspired me for each one. Family, for example, is exactly what it sounds like, but then there's a track like Flack, which was all inspired by a video game, Unreal Tournament. Unreal Tournament
Ooh.
99, especially because the soundtracks to those games. Have you played Unreal Tournament?
I have. And it's a very interesting series in terms of music and aesthetic because it's this absolute time capsule of the early 2000s and late 90s. Um,
Truly.
it's just that type of energy, that type of drum beat.
Yeah,
You don't get much of that anymore.
you really don't. So to hear that sound, that energy with the strings and these driving drums always got me. And I started writing Flack, and before I knew it, I just felt like I was just in an Unreal Tournament match back in the early 2000s, and I was just going with that feel. So every track had this inspiration, and I didn't have to worry about lyrics, which is kind of a big thing, although I had made a point to mention that most of my songs were lyrical, had vocals, but I'm also super self-conscious about my vocals, so I would tend to sit on songs for a long time, not really, sure if what I put down was good enough. So I was very freed of that with On My Mind. I didn't have to worry about vocals. It was entirely what I put down instrumentally. That was really freeing from a production standpoint?
I can only begin to imagine, because vocals are, I mean, obviously, like if you're writing a rock song, obviously guitar riffs are very important. The backing instrumental is very important, but
Mhm.
it still almost feels secondary at times to the actual vocals, because that's what your mind kind of prioritizes.
Right.
You know, it hears words in your language and it takes that as, this is the focus for me, because
Mhm.
this is something that I understand.
Right.
These are words mean something, so I'm going to focus on those.
Yeah, spot on. So that really changed everything for me from that production standpoint to even what I feel when I listen to it. That's really a good point from a consumer standpoint.
In some of the previous interviews that I've done, the conversation has inevitably shifted to, you know, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, the question of how does an indie get found?
Right.
So On My Mind got picked up to air on UC Davis's KDVS 90.3 FM after release. How did that deal get started? How did that happen?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is a perfect case of who you know. I was so lucky. I was so fortunate to work with the DJ who aired the song on his show, The Space Traveler. And I had worked with him, and we kind of had this initial discussion, just this budding discussion about music. And he was telling me, how he was into electronic music. He used to make it and then kind of didn't really any longer, but then he was starting to get back into it. He was asking me questions about gear, and we started connecting on music. And that months had gone by. We just had passively talked for a while, and then he had mentioned that he had a show where he was basically he was sharing music with me, and that he had a show with UC Davis called The Space Traveler that was into finding indie artists and sharing their music. And he kept telling me that was what it was all about. And that really resonated with me, because I felt just so flattered and so humbled when we were talking and he had mentioned, oh, hey, if you want to send me that music, I'll air it for you. And I was like, what? I was just like totally beside myself. And that was how that got started. He told me, he's like, all right, I've got the tracks. I got him the tracks, and he told me when he was going to air it, and it was just insane. So Al and I both, we decided we were going to do a grassroots marketing campaign. She made me these sweet personal pics, personalized pics that say my Twitter and Instagram handle on them. This is Dom Draper. And we went to UC Davis, and we just were kind of like putting them out on like the cafeteria lunch tables and like little hot spots and stuff. And I was like, posing for some pictures in front of the KDVS sign and tweeting stuff and throwing hashtags out there to see if like any of the campus kids are like, checking Twitter, finding the pics. And it was just like this exhilarating experience. And let me tell you, when it finally got to the point where it was airing, I was out in the car with Al, and the second it started, I cried. I did not expect it, but I cried. It was so emotional. It was just the most wonderful thing. So to really echo what John had mentioned, John being the wonderful dude who got my music on the air, it just like getting people's music out there, and just like that being what they do, that was a really something that resonated with me. I think just finding people sharing music you're passionate with other people is just an incredible way to help aid in discovery and sharing new music with people.
That really is a beautiful thing. And I mean, especially once it finally hits, that's just kind of the moment, where you realize that this is your payoff. Yeah. Other people are going to hear this. Other people are going to enjoy this. Maybe, maybe it'll change somebody's mind on this style of music. Who knows? The possibilities are endless. Music is this just beautiful, transformative art. And that's the way that I've kind of come to view it. That as different people experience music, it's kind of got a piece of yourself in it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so true.
Where it's like, as you had mentioned, the track Flack built around playing Unreal Tournament as a kid.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a little bit of your past put into this music that somebody else is going to hear. Maybe they aren't necessarily going to pick up on that part of it, though some of them, maybe they will. Maybe there's somebody else out there in the same situation. Unreal was real popular back in the day.
Right.
So it's like, maybe somebody else will catch that. It's like, what are they going to do after that? Are they going to go play Unreal Tournament, or are they going to reminisce about old times? What's going to happen, It's
Right.
like,
That is seriously, that is the beautiful part. Just what you can, just putting it out there, and then, yeah, you never know how it's going to affect somebody else, and it could just be a beautiful thing, whether it be a memory for them or it just makes them feel good in the moment.
I will have to say about those guitar picks, though, you can never change your handles ever again now, right?
I know. That was a little, that was damning. Yep.
At least you got a good one.
I'm grateful.
You didn't end up being the guy that was like, I think I'll stick around with the name Gamerzone with 3 underscores for the next 10 months of my life. You weren't that guy, so you're lucky.
Amen.
So where do you see your style and music going next? Like, what's up on the horizon?
I am so excited to start sharing more electronic music. I have some stuff in the works, some stuff I've teased, and oh my gosh, it's all just kind of like a little bit floating in the ether here, but I've got a couple things in the works, a remix of Help and an original song that are going to be a lot more, speak a lot more to what I'm influenced by right now, and that really is the likes of Lady Gaga and Hyperpop, and kind of still sticking with surrealism as far as the original track's concerned. I really want it to take you away and also let the music aid in taking you to that place. And I think the electronic musical style is such a motivator in that sense. It can really take you places, especially the future. And that's what I'm going to leave you with as a teaser.
Absolutely. Well, all right. Well, one last question, and I think this is a fun one. So imagine for a minute that we're in a perfectly safe post-COVID world and concerts are back to normal, all right?
Okay.
You've got the chance to play a show with any artist of your choice, living or dead.
Oh.
Who would it be?
This is a phenomenal question. Okay. It's Lady Gaga. Oh my gosh, she can do anything. When I saw her up on stage with Metallica slaying it, when I see her on stage playing her own music and twisting it into like this like metal chuggy glory, and then as far as her vocal capability, need not even be mentioned. She's the one. I know for a fact from who I believe she seems to be as a person, and how creative and interesting she is. And I feel like we'd get on really well. And then I feel like as far as musically, no problem there. I think there would be so much to work with. I think it'd be phenomenal.
She really is very varied, but I feel like this is also a really good example of how your tastes in music have evolved just because of the fact that, okay, cat out of the bag. I've known you for years now.
Yeah.
But years and years ago, if I had asked you this question, I feel like the answer would have been Steven Tyler.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Because that's actually who I was expecting the answer to this to be when I first wrote out the question on the sheet. I was like...
I surprised you.
I can't be prepared for everything. I think that's something this year has taught me very well.
Yeah, that is the theme of 2020. You're the curveball.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dom, thanks for being on the show.
Oh my gosh, Andy, thank you so much for having me. I'm so humbled to be here, and it has been so much fun talking with you.
Absolutely. And man, hopefully after we've got, another couple singles, another EP, hopefully we'll see you around again.
Oh, right on. Definitely, man. Put me in the books.
Noted. All right. Well, for anybody interested in checking out Dom's music, it's available on Spotify and many more streaming platforms. I believe you distribute that through DistroKid, right?
That's right, and I honestly can't recommend DistroKid enough. As an indie artist, they've just been seamless. It's really it's cheap, and I've never had a problem, and that to me speaks volumes. They're great.
That's really good. Yeah, so you've got everything out on probably just about everything imaginable. I remember them having a really wide range of support, so you can check around Spotify, YouTube. I'd assume Apple Music is supported as well.
Right on. Yeah, honestly, just about anywhere you can imagine, from Amazon to Google to Apple Music to Spotify, and a lot of little guys too. So don't hesitate to give a search. I bet you'll find me.
That's really good. And of course, if you just prefer going the traditional indie route, his music is also available on Bandcamp.
Right on.
Yeah, so I'll be linking to both his Bandcamp and Spotify pages in the description. And you can also find some nifty little links below to follow Limitbreaker around the web there too. So everybody, I hope you have a good one.
Thanks, Andy. This is phenomenal. Have a fantastic night.